Hi everyone, welcome to my final project presentation. It's been a cool IT semester leading up to this, but we're here now. And today I'll be giving you an overview of the work I've been doing for the book-to-book interface throughout the class. So up first is discussing who the users are and what my initial requirements were for the interface. I identified my primary users as parents and guardians of children between the ages of birth to 12 years old, children between the ages of 6 to 12 themselves, and other non-guardian adults who read children. Secondary users are librarians and educators. I identified the stakeholders as being libraries, educational institutions, other literacy-focused institutions. But in general, users can be any individual or organization who's concerned about being able to place representative literature in front of young people. So for functional requirements, I knew the interface would need to allow the user to search for material by subject, as well as search by the characteristics of the main characters as well as the authors. I also wanted the users to be able to organize the books into shelves, and I learned that it needed to be able to utilize scaffolding to show children and adults how to complete tasks within the application. I also wanted it to suggest books according to the child's interests and demographics, which the app would know from, a survey that the parent or guardian or the child themselves would fill out in the beginning. And that the free version should support the creation of up to 3 bookcases. The data requirements listed here probably represent the most challenging part of programming the interface. So we would need a large database of children's literature, including indie publishers and self-publishing authors, and the data on the children to support the appropriate recommendations. So that would be that survey. So as far as non-functional requirements, I knew that the interface would need to be maintained regularly, and that the database should be updated a minimum of weekly with the newest children's books, and that it would have to be very high performance so that the user could manipulate hundreds of books on dozens of shelves without any sacrifice to performance, the application slowing down or anything like that. I came up with this tiered system of use that I would implement, with the free version being 3 or less bookcases, the professional version, so for a singular teacher in a singular classroom, of up to 25 bookcases, or the organizational subscription with up to 500 bookcases per year. As far as safety is concerned, I knew I wanted it to be secured from connecting to the outside internet. So I wanted it to be in line with the parental control settings that may be on the device. And I also knew that I also wanted it to be able to integrate into a library catalog, so that the user could see what's available at their local library and request that item to be sent there, or even recommend a purchase for classrooms and libraries. So if the library doesn't have the book the user would like to read, they can seamlessly recommend that purchase and present more diverse and indie authors to organizations that have historically been more limited to what they are presented with from big publishing companies. So that I was hoping that would help meet the goals of both the parent and the guardian, as well as the organization. It was only later that I thought about the technical feasibility of my requirements. And this list of requirements that I've presented to you here has evolved greatly from the first list of requirements I drew up for this project. So as far as my methodology um, is concerned for coming up with these requirements, I honestly utilize the steps of the design thinking process. So I started off by empathizing, imagining I was the parent of a child who identifies as part of a minority population, which I probably will be in the future, so it wasn't a huge stretch for me. A population that's not well represented in children's books. And truthfully, the vast majority of children's literature is written by white authors and features white main characters or animals. And this is way better today than it was when I was a kid, as some cited statistics will show, but I know that people still struggle to put representative literature for specific ages of children. And they still struggle to find representative literature. I work at a public library and I have questions about this all the time. So, as far as the problem is concerned, I define the problem as how do caregivers connect books by and about diverse populations to children who want to see themselves on their page. Next, I thought about how I could solve this problem. Well, I could create and periodically update a database of children's literature with data on race, gender identity, disability, heritage, sexual orientation, legal status, etc. of both the main characters and the authors. I could make an interface to access the database that was simple enough that older children could use it by themselves, and that a younger child would be engaged to use it with a parent to search by subject and pick out their own books. I could also find out demographic information about the children and use that to find out what would be the most relevant and engaging to them and recommend different purchases. I could frame it all within a bookcase metaphor that will be familiar and simple and that will be relatively easily learned. So that's pretty much how I came up with the requirements for the application. So as I said in the previous slide, I decided to frame my whole project through a bookcase, putting things on and off it in specific shelves and subjects. It's something most people have in their houses. Probably most people who are concerned about their kids reading at the very least. And so I wanted to be really reminiscent of that feel, but in a digital environment. And then as far as the concrete design is concerned, I knew I wanted to use similar icon forms to represent the subjects, and I wanted to have like thumbnails of the books. I knew I needed to have a search box, and I knew there had to be a survey component to find out what would be the most relevant to the kids themselves. So I experimented with a couple of methods for low fidelity prototypes and high fidelity prototypes. The ones I had the most success with were Adobe XD, thanks Cassie, and Fluid UI. And for low fidelity prototypes, I mainly just utilized a card-based prototype. I would sketch it out, what I thought it should look like, and then think about my scenarios to how a user would accomplish a specific goal, and then I would kind of break that into a card-based prototype so I could change the screen and see how a user would get from point A to point B. And during this, I kind of got a little bit of feedback on what parts of the metaphor would be easily learnable and which parts weren't readily understood, because I saw some difficulty in getting from the main page of the application to what looks like a bookcase supposedly to the area where you search for new books. So I kind of had to change it up a little bit to make that make more sense to the average user, or who I imagine to be the average user. And then when I moved on to create my high fidelity prototype, I broke it down to just one scenario that I thought all users basically would need to complete within the interface. And then I used Fluid UI to build a vertical prototype that could do most of the things required to accomplish a specific goal. So for me, the top level pages would have been a lot of time and resources to create a working prototype of. And I knew that almost basically everyone who would use this would want to search for a book by subject, an age appropriate book, save them and put them on their bookcase. So I knew that those were the main goals that I needed to make sure were really good. So I did kind of a little bit of research for this interface. For my issue paper, I decided to look at interaction design for children, again, a little bit more in depth. And through that, I found that there are several things that are especially important when designing for kids. One of them being participatory design. Because when you're designing for adults, chances are you have adults in the room. Chances are there might be someone in the room who would be a user of the interface. Whereas when you're designing for kids, that's not the case. Their brains are still developing, and it helps to have the people who are going to be using the application in the room, at least for the usability testing portion and the design portion. So you have something that actually works for the population you intend it to. Another thing I learned was that diverse populations have to be in the usability test subjects. There is such a vast difference in, a 6-year-old child versus a 12-year-old child. So it's really important to have a wide range of ages. There's a lot of difference between a kid on the autism spectrum and a kid with ADHD. So you need to be as diverse as possible in all senses of the word. Along with that, I found that children respond better to animation and animated icon forms, and that they respond actually very well to scaffolding to show them how to complete tasks. And of course, multimedia and interactive features keep their attention and keep them engaged. So for my usability testing, I kind of broke it down into 3 chunks. Pre-interaction, during interaction, post-interaction. So before the interaction, I got their consent form signed. I explained to them, why I was doing this. I answered any questions they had. I kind of gave them an overview of what the application was for. And then I presented 10 questions to them in a questionnaire format. That was mainly to gather demographic information and information that would tell researchers what sort of user the subject is. And then during the interaction, I utilized the retrospective think aloud method. So I would give the user a task to complete within that page of the interface. And then after they completed the task, I would ask them to describe their thoughts of it. So then I would back it up a page and then let them go through it again and tell me what they thought as they were doing each step. So that gave me a lot of interesting information, especially since I didn't want it to be a frustrating process for my subjects. I honestly didn't. I didn't know if it's maybe more helpful for it to be frustrating, because then you find out what, doesn't work more so. But I wanted them to be able to focus on the task at hand, because out, in the wild, as they say, no one's asking you to narrate all your thoughts as you're interacting with an interface. You're thinking about it, and you're problem solving. You're figuring out how to do it on your own. You're not, so I'm going over here, so I'm going down here. Oh, that just popped up. You're literally just engaging one-on-one with the thing and trying to figure out how to make it work. So I did that, and I took notes on what they said after the fact. And then post-interaction, I had 5 more questions in a questionnaire format to that utilized a Likert scale to kind of gauge how they felt about using the application. And then there were 10 open-ended interview questions. So the main goal of those was to kind of figure out any needs they had within the application that weren't met, figure out if they had any difficulty interacting or completing a specific task, and figure out like why they think they had that difficulty, anything that was missing, so on. So I was able to get users from these categories you'll see over here. And they're all very different. They're different ages. And I was able to time and record the interview process, and I timed the tasks as they took them. So the recommendations I got from that, from the usability testing, were basically that navigation needed to be improved. One of my subjects was older than the rest, substantially, the parent, and they self-described themselves as using mobile applications only occasionally, where the other 2 describe themselves as using them frequently. So I, learned that I need to make sure that occasional users of mobile applications are able to figure out how to interact with the device, because maybe occasional users should be able to interact. It's not like a rare or an infrequent user. So that was a big thing. So that subject in particular had difficulty navigating between the pages because I don't think I made the buttons obvious enough. I just need to use like traditional, stereotypical, and big, because that lends to usability for your younger kids as well. Big buttons, forward, backwards, yes, so on and so forth, check marks. And then I kind of felt like I left some spots open for usability testing, so I would want to do further testing within a more targeted parent population. So again, with those occasional users of mobile applications. And then I would also want to do further testing with children age 6 to 13, because I don't happen to know any children age 6 to 13, so I wasn't able to do any testing with them. So those were kind of the 2 big interface things I needed to work on, and the 2 big usability testing things I need to work on to get more solidified results and recommendations from the data. So thanks for watching, everyone. Any sources I alluded to for my issue paper or the statistics should be in the discussion box. Please let me know if you have any thoughts on my presentation. I look forward to seeing all of yours. Thank you. Bye.